Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're getting under the skin of one of the most highly anticipated, unapologetic 4x4s to hit the dirt in the last decade. The 2026 Toyota Land Cruiser FJ. We are talking about the baby Land Cruiser, a rugged IMV platform prodigy that is built to take on the Bronco and Wrangler. We are going to break down the engineering of this machine bolt by bolt so you know exactly what you are paying for. Let's dive right into the exterior, starting with the very first thing that catches your eye. When you look at the 2026 Land Cruiser FJ, you immediately notice those iconic retro-inspired flat body panels and chunky fender flares. But what is actually happening at a chemical level with the paint? Toyota is utilizing a highly durable multi-stage paint system designed to survive harsh global environments, from the Australian outback to the Mojave Desert. Let's look at the factory application. Standard colors like the classic ice cap white use a robust two-stage process, a pigmented base coat followed by a high solids polyurethane clear coat. However, if you step up to a premium color option like Wind Chill Pearl, this involves laying down a solid white base followed by a translucent midcoat packed with mica flakes to give it that deep, color-shifting pearlescent glow. And finally, it is sealed off with the clear coat. If we take a digital paint depth gauge to these body panels, Toyota's factory paint typically registers right around 4.5 to 5.5 mils thick. To put that into perspective, 1 mil is 1/1000th of an inch. The clear coat, the only layer protecting the actual color from UV degradation and oxidation, makes up roughly 1.5 to 2 mils of that total thickness. That is thinner than a sticky note. Because the Land Cruiser FJ has an upright, boxy stance, its front fascia, flat hood, and windshield surround have the aerodynamic profile of a brick. They are absolute magnets for high-velocity rock chips on the highway and aggressive pinstriping from branches on the trail. This is why relying solely on factory paint is a rookie mistake for an off-roader. To truly protect this vehicle, you need to understand the science of aftermarket armor. The gold standard for impact resistance is paint protection film, or PPF. The genius of modern PPF is its elastomeric polymers. If you drag a thorny branch down the side of your FJ, the film absorbs the scratch. When exposed to the heat of the sun or a heat gun, the polymers actively shift and self-heal, returning the surface to a mirror-smooth finish. For chemical resistance, you layer ceramic coating directly over the clear coat or the PPF. Nano-ceramic coatings utilize liquid silicon dioxide (CO2) and titanium dioxide (TO2). When applied, the carrier solvents flash off, and the ceramic cross links with the porous clear coat on a molecular level. The result is extreme hydrophobicity, meaning mud, hard water, and highly acidic bird droppings physically cannot bond to the surface. They just bead up and roll off, making your post-trail cleanup incredibly effortless, while preserving the lifespan of your FJ's paint. Now that we have armored the upper half of this baby Land Cruiser, we have to look at its only connection to the earth. You can have all the locking differentials in the world, but if your rubber is not up to the task, this FJ is not going anywhere. Let's talk about wheel and tire specifications, because Toyota has made some very deliberate engineering choices here. Sitting beneath those squared-off fender flares, the 2026 Land Cruiser FJ utilizes a highly pragmatic wheel setup. Depending on your trim, you are looking at either a rugged 17-inch steel wheel for the purists, or an 18-inch machine-faced alloy. Why not massive 20 or 22-inch wheels like you see on luxury SUVs? Because off-roading requires sidewall. That tall sidewall flexes and absorbs the jagged edges of rocks, acting as a secondary suspension system while keeping the bead firmly seated on the wheel lip. From the factory, you can expect an all-terrain tire, specifically tailored for the IMV0 platform's weight, likely in a 265/70R17 configuration. But let's look closer at the actual tread. Standard highway tires usually roll off the assembly line with about 10/32 of an inch of tread depth. The all-terrains fitted to the FJ step that up significantly, usually coming in at a meaty 13/32 to 15/32 of an inch. That extra depth is not just for longevity, it increases the void ratio, the empty space between the rubber tread blocks. A higher void ratio allows the tire to act like a paddle wheel in deep mud or snow. while integrated stone ejectors at the base of those voids prevent gravel from getting trapped and drilling into the tire carcass. But here is a pro tip that separates the seasoned-off roaders from the rookies. Checking your .date codes. Rubber is an organic compound, and it begins to degrade, harden, and succumb to UV oxidation. If you look at the sidewall of the FJ's tires, you will find a string of letters and numbers starting with dot. You are looking for the last 4 digits of that sequence inside a small oval. If that number reads 4,225, that means the tire was manufactured in the 42nd week of the year 2025. When you are buying a brand new vehicle or sourcing aftermarket mud terrains, you never want a tire that has been sitting in a hot warehouse for 2 years. Fresh rubber means pliable tread blocks, which translates to maximum mechanical grip when you are crawling over slick, rain-soaked granite. Moving up from the dirt and the contact patch, let's talk about how you are actually going to see the trail when the sun drops. We are moving into the next critical part of the lighting technology. At first glance, the 2026 Land Cruiser FJ hits you right in the nostalgia with those classic rounded headlight housings, reminiscent of the original FJ40 and the larger Land Cruiser 1958 edition. But do not let that retro aesthetic fool you. The engineering behind these polycarbonate lenses is light years ahead. Standard across the board, Toyota is utilizing high-output LED technology. However, if you option up to the premium tiers, you are stepping into the realm of Toyota's advanced matrix LED system. Let me break down exactly how matrix lighting works because it is an absolute game changer for night driving. Instead of a single bulb acting as a high or low beam, a matrix headlight uses a highly dense grid of dozens of individual light-emitting diodes. A forward-facing camera mounted high on the windshield continuously scans the road ahead. When that camera detects the taillights of a car you are following or the headlights of oncoming traffic, the vehicle's ECU instantaneously deactivates specific, targeted diodes within that grid. This creates a literal moving shadow over the other vehicles, preventing glare, while keeping your high beams blazing at maximum intensity everywhere else. You get unrestricted visibility without blinding your fellow drivers. Now, let's talk about the actual path of light. These factory LEDs push out a color temperature right around 5,500 to 6,000 Kelvin. This is deliberately engineered to mimic natural midday sunlight, which drastically reduces driver eye fatigue during a grueling night run. The internal projector lenses create a razor-sharp horizontal cutoff line, aiming the photons directly at the tarmac or the trail rather than scattering them uselessly into the canopy above. But what if you are doing high-speed runs across the desert at midnight? That is where we have to discuss laser lighting technology. While the factory FJ setup is purely led to satisfy strict DOT and global road regulations, the vehicle's modernized electrical architecture is built to easily integrate high-draw auxiliary lighting. If you bolt on aftermarket laser light pods, you are utilizing aerospace-grade tech. These pods shoot a blue laser through a yellow phosphor element to create an insanely intense focused white beam, while your factory LEDs provide massive width and flood for the immediate trail. Auxiliary lasers give you a piercing, hyper-focused spot beam that can throw usable light over a mile down the road. This ensures you never outdrive your headlights, allowing you to spot high-speed hazards long before you reach your braking limit. Even the amber clearance markers and integrated rear LED bars serve a mechanical purpose. Amber light has a longer wavelength than brilliant white light, allowing it to physically pierce through suspended dust, thick fog, and snow without reflecting a blinding white wall back into your eyes. All right, let's drop down and get our hands dirty. We are finishing up Phase 1 by crawling underneath the 2026 Land Cruiser FJ to inspect the true foundation of this vehicle, the underbody condition. You might think a boxy retro-styled 4x4 completely ignores aerodynamics, but that is a massive misconception. When you are pushing a brick through the air at 70 miles per hour, underbody airflow management is critical for stability and fuel efficiency. Toyota engineers have utilized a series of flat, composite undertrays that guide high-velocity air seamlessly beneath the chassis. This isn't just to eke out a fraction of an mpg, it creates a laminar flow that acts as a vacuum, actively pulling extreme heat down and out of the engine bay and away from the transmission tunnel. This thermal management is vital when you are doing low-speed, high RPM rock crawling in the middle of summer. Now, we have to address the elephant in the room, Toyota's historical battle with frame rust. If you live in the Rust Belt or take your rig on salt, sprayed beaches, winter road brine, and oceanic salt are the ultimate enemies of bare steel. Because the new FJ utilizes a highly robust modified version of the IMV ladder frame architecture, Toyota has taken zero chances. The entire high-strength steel frame undergoes a meticulous multi-stage electro-deposition process, commonly known as E-coating. The chassis is fully submerged, and an electrical current bonds the anti-corrosive primer to the steel at a molecular level, inside and out. But they did not stop there. The internal boxed sections of the frame feature strategically placed, oversized drainage holes. This ensures that when you plunge your FJ into a muddy river crossing, the corrosive silt and water immediately evacuate, rather than pooling inside the frame rails to rot the metal from the inside out. Finally, let's talk about armor. When you run out of ground clearance, your underbody shields become your best friends. From the factory, the FJ features a chunky hexagonal stamped steel skid plate up front that protects the steering rack and the lower radiator tank from devastating impacts. Moving rearward, you will find targeted steel shielding covering the exposed oil pan, the transmission sump, and the low-range transfer case. While these factory-stamped steel plates are perfectly adequate for moderate trail runs, hardcore rock crawlers will immediately notice the mounting points are designed to easily accept heavy-duty aftermarket armor. This allows you to bolt up full continuous 1/4-inch marine, grade aluminum, or heavy-gauge steel plates, giving you a completely smooth belly pan so you can literally slide the vehicle over granite boulders without tearing out your drivetrain. Let's pop the hood and move into the most critical part of this vehicle's DNA. This is where the true character of the 2026 Land Cruiser FJ is defined. Toyota has historically built its off-road legacy on one fundamental principle: relentless reliability. For the foundational global launch of the Land Cruiser FJ, built on the rugged IMV0 platform, Toyota has selected the legendary 2.7-liter 2TRFE inline-4. This is a naturally aspirated nanoe engine, producing roughly 160 horsepower and 181 pound-feet of torque. But let's break down the engineering behind why a naturally aspirated engine is often the purest choice for remote expeditions. This is a naturally aspirated nanoe engine, producing roughly 160 horsepower and 181 pound-feet of torque. But let's break down the engineering behind why a naturally aspirated engine is often the purest choice for remote expeditions. In an nanoe engine, air is drawn into the cylinders entirely by the vacuum created during the piston's downward intake stroke, relying solely on ambient atmospheric pressure. There are no secondary forced induction mechanisms to fail. The beauty of this setup, especially with the 2TRFE's cast iron engine block and aluminum cylinder head, is its absolute simplicity and low thermal stress. Because cylinder pressures remain relatively low compared to boosted applications, internal components experience significantly less wear over hundreds of thousands of miles. Furthermore, a naturally aspirated engine delivers perfectly linear, predictable throttle response. When you are balancing the vehicle on a slick rock ledge, you want exactly the power you ask for with your right foot. Nothing more, nothing less. However, natural aspiration has a major physical limitation. Altitude: for every 1,000 feet you climb above sea level, the air density drops, and an nanoe engine loses about 3% of its power. This is exactly why the global market is aggressively anticipating the integration of Toyota's proven turbocharged power plants, like the 2.8-liter 1GD-FTV turbo diesel, or potentially a 2.4-liter turbo gas hybrid for the North American market down the line. Let's look at the physics of a turbo. A turbocharger harnesses the rapidly expanding hot exhaust gases, leaving the engine to spin a turbine wheel. This turbine is connected via a shaft to a compressor wheel in the intake tract, which violently forces cool, dense air into the cylinders. Because you are packing more oxygen into the same physical space, you can add more fuel, creating a dramatically larger combustion event. The primary off-road benefit of a turbo is massive low RPM torque. A modern turbo engine can deliver peak torque at just 1,700 revolutions per minute, allowing you to easily push the FJ's weight up steep, muddy inclines without having to scream the engine near the red line. Furthermore, because the turbo creates its own internal atmosphere, it completely negates the power loss associated with high-altitude mountain passes. But what if you want the massive power of forced induction without the split? Second lag of waiting for a turbo to spool. That brings us to supercharging. Unlike a turbo that relies on exhaust gas, a supercharger is driven mechanically by a belt connected directly to the engine's crankshaft. As soon as the engine turns, the supercharger's twin screws are forcing air into the intake manifold. This provides absolute zero lag. You get the immediate, precise throttle control of a naturally aspirated engine, but with a massive, flat torque curve that starts right off idle. The trade-off is parasitic loss. Because it takes engine power to spin the heavy supercharger belt, it is inherently less fuel efficient than a turbo setup. Whether you are relying on the indestructible vacuum of the Na2.7L or looking forward to the torque, heavy turbocharged variants, understanding your induction system dictates exactly how you tackle the trail. Now that we know how the 2026 Land Cruiser FJ breathes, we need to talk about how it keeps its rhythm. We are diving into the internal timing mechanism. This might seem like a dry, purely mechanical topic, but I promise you, when you are 100 miles away from the nearest cell tower, this specific piece of engineering becomes the most important component in your entire vehicle. Let's break down the age-old battle, timing chain versus timing belt. First, let's establish what timing actually does. Deep inside the engine block, you have a crankshaft spinning furiously as the pistons pump up and down. Up in the cylinder head, you have camshafts opening and closing the intake and exhaust valves. These two drastically different zones must be synchronized to the exact millisecond. If a valve opens while a piston is traveling upward in what we call an interference engine, they will collide with catastrophic force, instantly destroying the engine. The component connecting the crank to the cams is your timing system. Historically, many vehicles including legendary older Toyota V8s like the 4.7-liter 2UZs relied on a heavy-duty toothed rubber timing belt. Engineers love belts because they are incredibly light, inherently quiet, and produce very little parasitic drag on the engine. But for a dedicated off-roader, a rubber belt has a fatal flaw. It is a ticking wear item. Rubber degrades. Most timing belts have a strict replacement interval of 90,000 to 100,000 miles. If you ignore that service, the belt can snap without warning. For an expedition vehicle meant to cross continents, having a rubber strap dictate the life or death of your engine is a massive liability. That brings us to the engineering inside the 2026 Land Cruiser FJ. Whether you are looking at the global 2.7-liter naturally aspirated 4-cylinder, the 2.8-liter turbo diesel, or the heavily rumored 2.4-liter turbo hybrid for the US market, Toyota has mandated the use of a heavy-duty timing chain. A timing chain looks exactly like a massively scaled-up, multi-link bicycle chain made of high-strength steel. Unlike a dry rubber belt, this steel chain lives entirely inside the engine block behind a sealed timing cover and is constantly bathed in pressurized engine oil. Because it is steel on steel, a timing chain is designed to be maintenance-free for the entire lifespan of the engine. You don't replace it at 100,000 miles, you just keep driving. But there is a specific science to how this chain operates, and it relies heavily on your maintenance habits. To keep that steel chain perfectly tight so it doesn't slap against the inside of the engine, Toyota utilizes hydraulic timing chain tensioners. These tensioners use the engine's own oil pressure to push nylon-coated guide rails tightly against the chain. This is exactly why you cannot cheap out on oil changes with the FJ. If you stretch your oil service intervals and sludge begins to build up, those tiny hydraulic ports in the tensioner can clog. If the tensioner fails, the chain goes slack. It jumps a tooth on the cam gear, and your engine timing is ruined. So, by outfitting the FJ with a timing chain, Toyota has given you the ultimate bulletproof foundation for off-grid reliability. You never have to worry about a belt snapping in the middle of a river crossing. As long as you give the engine the clean, high-quality synthetic oil it needs to maintain hydraulic pressure. Let's keep the momentum going. The engine generates the power, but it is the transmission that actually dictates how that power meets the dirt. We are now diving into the complex world of transmission logic. For the 2026 Land Cruiser FJ, Toyota engineers made a highly deliberate choice. They bypassed the trendy 8-speed and 10-speed gearboxes, and equipped this compact rig with their tried and true 6-speed, Super ECT, electronic-controlled transmission automatic. But why fewer gears when you are crawling over unpredictable terrain? The last thing you want is a transmission constantly hunting for the perfect gear, shifting up and down erratically. A 6-speed provides a broad, predictable power band with incredibly robust, oversized planetary gear sets that can handle immense shock loading when a spinning tire suddenly catches hard traction on a rock ledge. Now we absolutely must address the elephant in the modern compact SUV room, the CVT, or continuously variable transmission. Many soft rotor crossovers the size of the FJU CVTs to maximize highway fuel economy. A CVT relies on a steel push, belt riding between two variable width pulleys. While great for the commute, CVTs are notoriously fragile off-road. If you wedge a tire between two boulders and mash the throttle, the immense mechanical resistance can cause that internal steel belt to slip on the pulleys, instantly generating catastrophic heat and completely destroying the transmission. Because the Land Cruiser FJ is built on the rugged IMV0 ladder frame platform, Toyota outright rejected the CVT in favor of a traditional torque converter automatic. This gives you physical hardened steel gears transferring the engine's torque to the part. Time 4WD system, ensuring absolute reliability under extreme duress. Let's talk about the actual shift feel. The Super ECT in the FJ is not tuned for buttery, smooth luxury. It is tuned for positive, decisive engagement. Inside the torque converter is a mechanical lockup clutch. When you shift the transfer case into 4-low, Toyota's transmission logic adapts, engaging this lockup clutch much earlier than it would in a passenger car. This eliminates the slushy, disconnected feeling common in older automatics and creates a direct, one-to-one mechanical connection between the engine and the wheels. When you feather the throttle over a tricky obstacle, the vehicle responds instantly, mimicking the granular control of a manual transmission without the risk of burning up a clutch plate or stalling out. Finally, the true genius of this transmission lies in its grade logic. The FJ's onboard ECU constantly monitors the vehicle's pitch, yaw, and individual wheel speed. If you are descending a treacherous 20-degree mountain trail, relying purely on your hydraulic brakes is a recipe for disaster. The friction will boil your brake fluid and you will lose all stopping power. The moment the grade logic system detects a steep descent and senses you tapping the brake pedal, it actively intercepts the transmission and forces a downshift. This utilizes the engine's own internal compression to hold the vehicle back, a process known as engine braking. Conversely, when you are climbing a long, steep grade, the transmission holds lower gears much longer, keeping that 2TRE engine singing right in its peak torque band, rather than prematurely upshifting and bogging down the motor. We have talked about the iron, the aluminum, and the gears, but none of that hardware matters if the lifeblood of this 2026 Land Cruiser FJ is compromised. We are wrapping up Phase 2 by diving deep into fluid service history. Whether you are taking delivery of a brand new FJ or buying one slightly used a year from now, understanding the chemistry of these fluids dictates whether this rig lasts 20 years or 20 months. Let's start with engine oil. If you pop the hood and look at the oil filler cap on this modern IMV0 platform, you are going to see a requirement for 0W20 full synthetic oil. A lot of old-school mechanics will tell you that is too thin, like water, and that you need thick oil for off-roading. That is completely false. The 0W stands for its winter viscosity. When you cold start your FJ in freezing temperatures, a zero-weight oil flows instantaneously to the top of the cylinder head, pressurizing those hydraulic timing chain tensioners we talked about earlier. The 20 is the operating viscosity. Modern Toyota engines are machined with incredibly tight, microscopic bearing clearances. If you put a thick, conventional 10W40 oil in this engine, it literally cannot squeeze into those tiny gaps fast enough, and you will starve the bearings of lubrication. Furthermore, full synthetic oil has a uniform molecular structure that resists shear, meaning the oil molecules won't get chopped up and broken down under the extreme heat of low-speed rock crawling. Toyota might claim a 10,000 mile service interval, but if you are doing heavy off-roading, towing, or driving in dusty conditions, that is considered severe duty. You need to dump that oil every 5,000 miles to flush out the abrasive carbon blow and silica dust that sneaks past the air filter. Next, let's look at the cooling system. If you open the radiator overflow reservoir, you are going to see a very specific bright pink fluid. This is Toyota's proprietary super long life coolant, or SLC. Do not ever mix this with the cheap, generic green coolant from the auto parts store. The pink SLC utilizes organic acid technology. It is specifically formulated without silicates, amines, or nitrites. Why does that matter? Old-school green coolants use silicates to coat the inside of the engine, but over time, those silicates drop out of suspension and act like liquid sandpaper, destroying your water pump seals from the inside out. Toyota's pink oak coolant chemically bonds to the bare metal without leaving abrasive deposits, maintaining maximum thermal transfer. When you are crawling up a steep incline at 3 miles per hour, there is zero ram air coming through the grill. Your water pump and cooling fan are doing 100% of the work to keep that engine block from warping, so that coolant chemistry must be perfect. Finally, we have to talk about the most neglected fluid in the off-road world, brake fluid. The Land Cruiser FJ utilizes .3 or .4 heavy-duty brake fluid. Here is the terrifying reality about brake fluid. It is hygroscopic. That means it actively absorbs moisture directly out of the atmosphere, straight through the microscopic pores of the rubber brake hoses. Brand new brake fluid has a boiling point well over 400 degrees Fahrenheit. However, if that fluid absorbs just 3% water over a couple of years, that boiling point drops massively. Picture this. You are descending a miles-long 15-degree mountain pass with a fully loaded FJ. You are riding the brakes. The friction generates immense heat, which transfers into the calipers. If your brake fluid is old and full of water, it will physically boil inside the lines and turn into a gas. Because gas is compressible and liquid is not, your brake pedal will instantly go straight to the floor and you will have zero stopping power. This is why a complete brake fluid flush is mandatory every 2 years or 20,000 miles, no exceptions. We are moving inside the 2026 Land Cruiser FJ and entering Phase 3. This is where the raw mechanical brawn we just talked about meets modern computational processing. For a dedicated off-roader, technology is not just about playing music or answering phone calls, it is a vital survival tool. Let's focus on one of the most critical safety and capability features on this new rig, the camera ecosystem. When you are strapped into the driver's seat of a boxy upright 4x4 like the FJ, your natural outward visibility is inherently compromised by the vehicle's own hood and thick pillars. To solve this, Toyota has integrated an incredibly advanced, high-definition 360-degree camera system, officially known in their lineup as the Multi-Terrain Monitor, or MTM. But we need to talk about the actual resolution of these cameras because this is where a lot of manufacturers cut corners. Historically, backup cameras on compact SUVs have looked like a fuzzy, low-bitrate VHS tape. If you are backing out of a driveway, that might be fine. But if you are reversing down a narrow, rocky shelf with a massive drop-off on your passenger side, a grainy, pixelated camera feed is virtually useless. You cannot tell the difference between a deep shadow and a tire shredding rock. Toyota understood this assignment. The 2026 FJ utilizes ultra, high-resolution, wide-angle digital lenses mounted in the front grille, beneath both side mirrors, and integrated into the rear tailgate. These lenses feed directly into a high-speed video processing module that stitches the images together to create a seamless, real-time top-down 360-degree view. While the physical infotainment display might not be an IMAX theater, the internal video processing is heavily rumored to handle 4K-level sensor data. What does this mean for you? It means absolute crispness. When you engage the multi-terrain monitor in 4-low, the front camera activates and gives you what Toyota calls a transparent hood or underfloor view. The system actually records the terrain you are driving toward, delays the video feed perfectly in sync with your vehicle's speed, and projects that high-res image on the screen, showing you exactly where your front tires are currently positioned underneath the vehicle. Because the camera resolution is so dense, you can easily identify sharp shale, deep ruts, and slippery mud patches with razor-sharp clarity, allowing you to place your tires with millimeter precision. Furthermore, let's talk about the backup camera logic. It is not just a static wide-angle view when you shift into reverse. The high-res rear camera automatically adjusts its exposure based on the lighting conditions, using aggressive high dynamic range HDR processing. So the image doesn't blow out if the sun is directly behind you. It also features dynamic, steering, linked grid lines that physically bend on the screen to show your exact projected path. If you are towing a small overland trailer or a pair of jet skis, the system even features a dedicated trailer, hitch, assist zoom function, giving you a macro high-definition view of the hitch ball so you can line up your trailer perfectly on the very first try, entirely by yourself. Let's keep exploring the digital architecture of the 2026 Land Cruiser FJ, We have covered how the vehicle sees the world around it, but now we need to talk about how it recognizes you. We are diving into the keyless ecosystem, specifically the walk-away lock and the highly advanced digital key technology. In the old days of off-roading, you had a physical metal key. You would put it in your pocket, go hike a trail, and pray it didn't fall out into a river. The new Land Cruiser FJ completely rewrites that narrative with a highly secure, multi-layered proximity ecosystem. At the foundation of this system is the traditional smart key fob, but the way it communicates with the FJ's ECU is fascinating. The vehicle is equipped with a network of low-frequency oscillator antennas hidden inside the exterior door handles, the rear tailgate, and strategically placed throughout the cabin. These antennas are constantly broadcasting a localized ping. When you walk within about 1.5 meters of the vehicle, your key fob wakes up and responds with a highly encrypted rolling code radio frequency. RF signal. The vehicle's computer instantly authenticates the cryptographic handshake and physically unlocks the doors when you grab the handle. But what happens when you have your hands full of heavy recovery gear or camping equipment and you walk away? That is where the walk-away auto-lock logic takes over. The system actively monitors the received signal strength indicator, or RSSI. As you walk away from the FJ, the signal degrades. Once the ECU detects that the fob has crossed the outer threshold of the antenna's range, it automatically triggers the locking actuators and flashes the hazard lights to confirm the perimeter is secure. But Toyota is pushing the 2026 FJ even further into the future with its digital key technology. As part of the connected services suite, your smartphone completely replaces the physical key fob. You might be wondering, what if I lose cell service out in the middle of the desert? That is the genius of the engineering. The digital key relies entirely on Bluetooth Low Energy, BLE, not a cellular network. Once you set up the digital key in the Toyota app, the cryptographic credential is mathematically locked inside your phone's secure enclave, the exact same tamper-proof hardware that protects your credit cards and biometric data. As you approach the FJ, the vehicle's Bluetooth antennas communicate directly with your phone. You can unlock, start, and drive the vehicle without ever taking your phone out of your pocket, miles away from the nearest cell tower. This also introduces a massive functional benefit for expeditions. Digital key sharing if you are at base camp, and your buddy needs to grab the recovery boards out of the back of your FJ, you do not need to walk over and hand them a physical fob. You simply text them a secure temporary digital key that grants them access for a limited time, which you can revoke instantly from your own device. Now that we have successfully unlocked the 2026 Land Cruiser FJ and stepped inside, we have to address how this vehicle behaves when it is actually moving down the highway. We are talking about driver assistance sensitivity. In the past, dedicated off-roaders were notoriously analog. You were entirely on your own. But the new FJ is equipped with Toyota Safety Sense 3.0, SS 3.0, and the way these advanced driver assistance systems ADAS feel is a massive leap forward in computational logic. Let's start with the hardware. At the top of the windshield sits a high-resolution, wide-angle forward-facing camera, working perfectly in tandem with a millimeter-wave radar sensor hidden behind the Toyota badge on the grille. In previous generations, these systems could feel incredibly jerky and reactive. You would get cut off in traffic, and the vehicle would aggressively slam on the brakes, spilling your coffee and spiking your heart rate. ESS 3.0 completely rewrites that algorithm with a feature called Proactive Driving Assist PDA. PDA acts like an invisible co-pilot. If you are cruising down a winding two-lane mountain road, the system uses the camera to look far ahead at the curvature of the upcoming tarmac. If you are carrying too much speed into a sharp bend, PDA will smoothly and gently apply the brakes before you even hit the corner, mimicking the natural driving habits of a seasoned professional. It also actively manages the gap between you and pedestrians, cyclists, or parked cars on the shoulder, applying micro-steering corrections to give them a wider berth without abruptly jerking the steering wheel out of your hands. This refined logic extends directly into the Dynamic Radar Cruise Control, DRCC. When you set your cruising speed on a long highway stretch, you now have 4 distinct following distance settings instead of the traditional 3. Because the new millimeter-wave radar has a significantly wider field of view, it can detect a vehicle merging into your lane much earlier. Instead of braking when the merging car crosses the white line, The FJ anticipates the lane change and smoothly rolls off the throttle, decelerating naturally. We also need to talk about lane tracing assist LITA. Old systems used to pong you between the white lines, making you feel like a bowling ball in a bumper lane. The FJ's lane tracing assist uses a heavily refined electric power steering motor to continuously provide microscopic torque adjustments, keeping you dead center in the lane. And crucially for those exploring remote areas, the TSS 3.0 camera is now sensitive enough to detect 3D objects like guardrails and dirt road edges, not just perfectly painted white lines. But here is the most important engineering detail for an off-roader, the defeatability. Toyota engineers know that when you shift the transfer case into 4 low and point the nose of the FJ at a massive boulder, the last thing you want is the pre-collision system deploying full emergency braking because it thinks you are about to crash into a wall. The moment you engage low range or activate the multi-terrain select system, the FJ's computer automatically dials back or completely disables these highway-focused nannies, putting 100% of the mechanical control firmly back in your hands. We are wrapping up Phase 3 with the final, and arguably most dynamic, piece of the digital puzzle. We have talked about the hardware, the cameras, and the sensors. But none of that matters if the code running it is archaic. We are diving into the software version, focusing specifically on over-the-air updates, and the outright elimination of infotainment lag. Let's be brutally honest for a second. If you owned a Toyota vehicle anywhere between 2012 and 2021, you intimately know the pain of infotainment lag. The old in-tune software architecture was notoriously underpowered. You would tap the screen to open the map, wait 3 seconds. Wonder if you actually pressed it, tap it again, and suddenly the system would freeze. When you are navigating a complex multi-forked-off road trail, you cannot afford a screen that stutters when you try to pinch and zoom. For the 2026 Land Cruiser FJ, Toyota threw that old architecture in the trash. The vehicle is running the latest generation of the Toyota Audio Multimedia System, built on a highly stable automotive-grade Linux foundation. But the real magic is the hardware running the software. Toyota has integrated a massively upgraded processor that boasts up to 5 times the computational processing power of the previous generation, backed by high-speed solid-state memory. What does that mean for you? It means zero latency. Whether you are interacting with the standard 10.5-inch screen or the premium 12.3-inch display, the user interface responds with the exact same fluid, 60 frames per second snap as your flagship smartphone. Menus glide, maps rotate effortlessly, and wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto boot up the second you hit the ignition. But a fast screen is only half the battle. The true evolution is how this system stays relevant as the years go on. In the past, if a software bug was discovered, or if you simply wanted updated highway maps, you had to schedule an appointment at the dealership, wait in the lobby, and have a technician manually flash the system via the OBD, ePort, or a USB drive. The 2026 FJ permanently severs that tether through highly advanced over-the-air OTA updates. The vehicle features a built-in 5G data transceiver. As you are driving down the highway, the FJ can quietly download encrypted software packets in the background. And this isn't just about updating the color of the radio icons, because modern vehicles are essentially rolling computer networks. Toyota's OTA capability is deeply integrated into the vehicle's core architecture. Toyota can wirelessly push critical updates to the proactive driving assist cameras, patch cybersecurity vulnerabilities, refine the engine's throttle mapping, or push highly detailed, updated topographic maps directly to your Drive Connect cloud navigation. Furthermore, the system utilizes dual bank memory. When an update installs, it loads onto an inactive memory bank. If the update fails or gets corrupted due to a dead 12-volt battery, the FJ simply reboots using the old, stable memory bank, ensuring your vehicle is never bricked in the driveway. You are investing in a 4x4 that physically learns, adapts, and improves its own logic long after it leaves the assembly line. Now that we have successfully navigated the digital brain of this machine, it is time to climb inside, shut the door, and get comfortable. We are officially starting Phase 4. You are going to be spending hundreds of hours behind the wheel of your 2026 Land Cruiser FJ. And the materials Toyota chose for this cabin are built around a very specific philosophy: rugged endurance. Let's break down the exact upholstery grades you are going to encounter, and why traditional luxury materials actually work against you on the trail. If you are looking at the base 1958 or Heritage style trims, You are met with a heavy-duty, tightly woven cloth fabric. But this isn't the cheap, static cling polyester you remember from the 90s. This is a highly advanced stain-resistant synthetic, weave designed specifically to breathe well in hot climates while repelling light moisture. However, the true star of the Toyota off-road lineup, and what you will find standard on the mid to high trims of the FJ is Soft-X. Soft-X is Toyota's proprietary synthetic, or vegan, leather. A lot of old-school purists immediately demand real Nappa or full-grain aniline leather, assuming it is the ultimate upgrade. But let's look at the chemistry. Real leather is organic animal hide. It is highly porous. If you are blasting down a Desert 2 track with the windows down, ultrafine silica dust settles deep into the pores of real leather. If you get caught in a rainstorm with the doors off, or jump into the driver's seat soaking wet after a river recovery, real leather absorbs that water. As it bakes in the sun afterward, it loses its natural oils, shrinks, and permanently cracks unless you meticulously condition it every single month. Soft-X, on the other hand, is a highly engineered thermoplastic polyurethane TPU. It is chemically manufactured to be 100% hydrophobic. Mud, spilled coffee, and muddy dog paws literally cannot penetrate the surface. They just wipe completely clean with a damp microfiber cloth. Furthermore, Soft-X weighs roughly half as much as genuine leather, generates far fewer VOCs, volatile organic compounds during manufacturing, and is highly resistant to UV degradation. It will look exactly the same in 10 years as it does on the showroom floor. Finally, we have to talk about the physical architecture of the seat itself, specifically bolster wear. The Land Cruiser FJ is a high-clearance 4x4. Every single time you climb in and out, you are dragging your entire body weight directly across the outer thigh and torso bolsters of the seat. In a typical passenger car, this repetitive friction completely crushes the internal foam and tears the stitching within a few years. To combat this, Toyota engineers utilize a dual-density injected foam core for the FJ's front seats. The center cushion is exceptionally plush to isolate your spine from harsh trail impacts, but the outer bolsters are poured with a significantly higher density, rigid foam. This rigid outer skeleton is then wrapped with heavy-duty, double French stitching, ensuring the seat retains its aggressive body-hugging shape even after thousands of ingress and egress cycles. Now that you are sitting comfortably on those dual-density Soft-X seats, we need to talk about the auditory experience inside this cabin. Off-roading is inherently a violently loud activity. You have the mechanical roar of the engine, the aggressive howl of all-terrain tires pounding the pavement, and let's be honest, the aerodynamic profile of a cinder block punching a hole through the wind at 70 miles per hour. This brings us to a massive pillar of automotive engineering that dictates how premium a vehicle actually feels. NVH, which stands for noise, vibration, and harshness. For a compact body, on-frame vehicle like the 2026 Land Cruiser FJ, managing NVH is an incredibly difficult engineering challenge. A heavy steel ladder frame acts like a giant tuning fork, transferring the energy of every rock and pothole upward, while the boxy steel cabin acts like a drum, amplifying those vibrations. To counteract this, Toyota engineers have deployed a multi-tiered acoustic defense system to completely isolate the living space from the chaos outside. Let's start with the greenhouse. If you roll down the driver's side window on the premium trims and look closely at the top edge, you will notice it is not a single solid piece of tempered glass. Toyota is utilizing acoustic double-pane glass for the windshield and front side windows. This is a highly specialized laminated glass sandwich. It consists of two outer layers of hardened glass permanently bonded together by a thick, clear layer of polyvinyl butyryl, or PVB, acoustic resin. This microscopic polymer layer acts as a physical shock absorber for sound waves. When high-frequency wind noise, like the piercing whistle generated by those massive retro-styled side mirrors or a roof rack, hits the window, the PVB layer actively disrupts the acoustic frequency, preventing the sound wave from penetrating the cabin. It is the absolute difference between having a relaxed conversation at highway speeds and having to scream at your front passenger. But the acoustic glass only handles airborne noise. We also have to mitigate structure-borne noise. Before the FJ's bare steel body shell even hits the paint booth on the assembly line, automated robots precisely spray a proprietary liquid, applied sound deadener, La Stand, directly onto the floor pans, the inner firewall, the transmission tunnel, and deep inside the door cavities. As this dense mastic material cures and hardens, it massively increases the mass of the panels and completely eliminates the tin can resonance of the raw sheet metal. This specific layer of engineering is critical for silencing the exhausting low-frequency drone generated by chunky mud terrain tires rolling across asphalt. Finally, we have the physical connection between the cabin tub and the frame itself. The FJ's body is not bolted solidly to the chassis, it rests on highly engineered, shear-style cab mounts. These mounts utilize specific durometer rubber and, in key stress locations, internal hydraulic fluid chambers. When your suspension hits a brutal washboard dirt road, these mounts physically flex and absorb the kinetic energy, completely decoupling the harsh high-frequency vibrations of the frame from the floorboards of the interior. The result? You arrive at your remote campsite feeling completely refreshed and fatigue-free, rather than feeling like you just spent 6 hours inside an industrial paint shaker. Now that we have effectively sealed the cabin off from the harsh acoustic chaos of the outside world, we have to talk about what you are actually breathing while you are sealed inside. We are moving into a critical element of the living space, climate, and air quality. When you are out on a dusty, multi-day expedition, your vehicle is essentially an environmentally controlled life raft. Let's start with the physical climate control architecture. Unlike so many modern automakers that are burying their HVAC controls deep inside frustrating touchscreen menus, Toyota understands that an off-roader needs tactility. The 2026 Land Cruiser FJ features a dedicated dual-zone automatic climate control panel with heavily knurled, physical dials and tactile toggle switches. When you are bouncing down a rocky trail or wearing heavy winter gloves, you can adjust the temperature entirely by muscle memory without ever taking your eyes off the terrain. The dual-zone system utilizes highly responsive stepper motors to independently control the blend doors, meaning the driver can have cold air blasting while the passenger runs the heat to dry out wet hiking boots. But temperature regulation is just the baseline. The true engineering marvel here is the air quality management. If you have ever driven in a convoy down a dry, silty desert track, you know that ultra-fine moon dust inevitably finds its way into the cabin. Standard cabin air filters just trap the big stuff, leaving microscopic particulate matter floating in the air. This is where Toyota brings in its heavy artillery, the advanced nanoe-X trademark air purification system, developed in partnership with Panasonic. This is not a traditional passive HEPA filter. It is an active, electrostatic atomization technology. Hidden deep within the FJ's ventilation ducting is a titanium electrode. The system actively collects invisible moisture directly from the ambient cabin air and applies a high-voltage electrical charge to it. This microscopic process produces trillions of nano-sized water particles every second, each packed with highly reactive hydroxyl radicals. When these nano-X particles are blown into the cabin, they don't just circulate, they aggressively hunt down pollutants. Because they are enclosed in water droplets, these hydroxyl radicals survive much longer than standard ions. They physically attach to airborne silica dust, pollen, mold spores, and even bacteria and viruses. At a molecular level, the hydroxyl radicals extract hydrogen from the pollutant proteins, instantly denaturing them and rendering them completely harmless. And the benefits go beyond just medical-grade lung protection. If you throw a wet, muddy dog in the back, or your gear smells like campfire smoke, the nanoe-X system actively breaks down the volatile organic compounds causing those odors, completely neutralizing them within an hour. Furthermore, because it utilizes atomized water, it actually prevents moisture evaporation in the cabin, keeping your skin and eyes hydrated during long, grueling drives across arid climates. You are quite literally breathing cleaner, healthier air inside your FJ than you are standing outside of it. We are wrapping up the living space by tackling the electrical nervous system of the cabin. We have made sure you are comfortable and breathing clean air. But none of that matters if your critical navigation and communication devices go dead in the middle of nowhere. We are talking about connectivity ports. In the modern era of overlanding, your vehicle isn't just a mode of transportation. It is a mobile power station. Let's start with the hardwired connections. If you look at the lower dash and inside the center console of the 2026 Land Cruiser FJ, the archaic, low-amperage rectangular USB ports are completely gone. Toyota has fully transitioned to a high-output USB-C power delivery PD architecture. But we need to explain why this is a massive engineering upgrade, not just a shape change. An old-school USB A port typically maxes out at about 5 to 10 watts of power. If you are running a heavy topographical mapping app like nanoe-X Off-Road or Gaia GPS on a large tablet, with the screen at maximum brightness, a 10-watt port cannot physically supply power fast enough. Your battery will actively drain while it is plugged in. The FJ's USB-C PD ports operate on an entirely different protocol. When you plug in a device, a microchip inside the vehicle's port physically shakes hands with the microchip in your device to negotiate the maximum safe voltage. These ports can push up to 45 watts of intelligent power. This means you can actively fast charge a completely dead iPad Pro, replenish a 4K drone battery, or power a satellite communicator directly from the dashboard while simultaneously running heavy applications. Toyota also heavily reinforced the physical mounting brackets behind the dash panels for these ports, so heavy-duty braided cables won't snap the internal soldering when the vehicle is violently bouncing down a washboard road. Now, let's address the highly controversial topic of wireless charging in an off-road vehicle. Historically, wireless charging pads in 4x4S are absolutely useless. You hit one bump, the phone slides a quarter-inch off the internal induction coil, and the charging completely stops. Even worse, standard Qi chargers generate immense radiant heat. If your phone is hot from streaming music and navigating, and you throw it on a hot charging pad, the phone's internal thermal management system will trigger a failsafe and shut down the battery charging entirely to prevent a lithium-ion fire. Toyota engineers solved both of these critical failures in the FJ first. The 15-watt Qi-compatible wireless charging tray is deeply recessed into the center console and lined with a high-friction, molded elastomeric rubber mat. This physically locks your phone into position, keeping it perfectly centered over the primary induction coil, even when you are pitched at a 30-degree angle on a rock face. Second, and most importantly, they integrated active thermal management. Hidden beneath the charging pad is a micro-vent channel directly tied to the vehicle's HVAC system. When you place your phone on the pad, it subtly drafts cool, air-conditioned air across the back of the device. This entirely prevents thermal throttling, ensuring your phone stays ice-cold and accepts a maximum 15-watt charge rate, no matter how hard you are pushing its processor. All right, we've armored the exterior, analyzed the mechanical heartbeat, decoded the digital brain, and made ourselves comfortable in the living space. But now, it is time to sit down at the dealership desk and look at the actual math. Welcome to Phase 5 Inches. We are stripping away the romance of overlanding and diving into the raw ownership reality. Starting with a massive hidden expense, insurance grouping and cost. When you buy a dedicated 4x4 like the 2026 Land Cruiser FJ, insurance actuaries do not care about your locking differentials or your approach angles. They care about repairability, safety metrics, and risk profiles. Historically, off-road vehicles like the Jeep Wrangler or Ford Bronco command incredibly high insurance premiums. They have removable doors, removable roofs, and complex structures that are notoriously expensive to fix after a highway collision. But Toyota has completely flipped the script with the FJ, and it all comes back to that MV0 platform architecture. Insurance companies base a massive portion of your collision premium on how much it costs to replace body panels. The 2026 FJ is deliberately designed with a modular utilitarian ethos. If you slide on an icy road and smash the front corner into a guardrail, you do not have to replace an entire, massive $3,000 stamped aluminum front fascia. The FJ utilizes segmented, multi-piece bumpers and flat, easily stamped steel body panels. This extreme modularity means repair shops can swap out a single damaged corner piece in 20 minutes. Actuaries love cheap, fast repairs, and that immediately drops the vehicle into a significantly more affordable insurance grouping. Next, we have to look at the liability and medical side of your premium. As we discussed in Phase 3, the FJ is equipped with Toyota Safety Sense 3.0. When your insurance provider runs the VIN on this vehicle, their system instantly registers the millimeter wave radar, the proactive driving assist, and the pre-collision system with pedestrian detection. Because statistically rear-end collisions and low-speed urban impacts make up the vast majority of insurance payouts, having a vehicle that will actively brake itself to prevent an accident triggers massive automated discounts on your policy. Finally, there is the global elephant in the room: vehicle theft. Historically, vehicles carrying the Land Cruiser badge are absolute magnets for organized theft rings, particularly those using relay attacks to clone key fob signals. To combat this, Toyota has heavily fortified the FJ's cybersecurity. The key fobs feature a motion-sensing sleep mode that turns off the RF broadcast when the key is sitting still on your kitchen counter, entirely preventing driveway relay attacks. Furthermore, the vehicle's onboard telematics feature stolen vehicle tracking directly tied to local law enforcement. Because of this trifecta, cheap modular repairs, autonomous collision prevention, and advanced anti-theft tech, you can expect the 2026 Land Cruiser FJ to undercut its direct American competitors by hundreds of dollars a year in insurance costs, making it one of the most financially sensible 4x4s to actually own long-term. Now it is time for the hardest pill to swallow for any new 4x4 owner. We are diving into the second part of our reality check, real-world MPG and range. Let's get one thing completely straight right out of the gate. If your primary goal is maximizing your miles per gallon, you are looking at the wrong vehicle. The 2026 Land Cruiser FJ is a heavy body, on-frame, solid axle, capable brick punching a hole through the atmosphere. When you look at the window sticker at the dealership, the EPA estimates for the foundational 2.7-liter naturally aspirated 4-cylinder are likely going to advertise somewhere around 19 mpg in the city and 22 mpg on the highway, netting a combined rating of roughly 20 mpg. In a sterile laboratory environment on a rolling dynamometer with stock street tires. Sure, those numbers are mathematically accurate. But that is not how you are going to use this vehicle. Here is the ownership reality. The second you drive off the lot and swap those factory tires for a heavier E-load rated 33-inch mud terrain, you instantly increase the rotational mass and rolling resistance at all four corners. That alone will shave 1.5 to 2 mpg off your average. Then, you bolt a 60-pound steel roof rack to the top, throwing the factory aerodynamics completely out the window. Add a 150-pound steel front bumper, a winch, and a rear drawer system full of recovery gear. And suddenly, your sleek new FJ is weighing in 600 pounds over its factory curb weight. In the real world, fully loaded for an overland trip, you need to expect an actual highway average closer to 16 or 17 mpg. If you are facing a heavy headwind on the interstate, the transmission is going to aggressively downshift into fifth or even fourth gear just to maintain 70 miles per hour, completely tanking your fuel economy. This directly translates to your maximum range. The FJ is packaged on the compact IMV0 platform, which means physical space between the frame rails is limited. Assuming a standard fuel tank capacity of around 18 to 20 gallons, your mathematical highway range sits right around 350 miles. However, when you shift the transfer case into 4 low and start crawling a technical trail at 3 miles per hour, you no longer measure fuel efficiency in miles per gallon. You measure it in gallons per hour. In deep sand or heavy snow, your engine is screaming near redline just to maintain forward momentum. Under those extreme conditions, your effective range can plummet to less than 100 miles on a full tank. This is exactly why serious expedition builders immediately look to the aftermarket for auxiliary long-range fuel tanks, or at the very least, mount 25-gallon jerry cans to the rear tailgate. If Toyota eventually blesses the global market with the heavily rumored 2.4-liter hybrid powertrain, those numbers will drastically improve in stop-and-go city traffic. But on the dirt, physics remains undefeated. Weight, rolling resistance, and aerodynamics will always dictate your fuel needle. Welcome back to the reality check. Now that we have established how much fuel this rig is going to burn, we need to talk about what is actually going to physically wear out. You bought a Toyota, so you are buying into a legacy of legendary reliability. But let's get one thing straight. Physics still applies. If you are taking this 2026 Land Cruiser FJ off the pavement and pushing it to its limits, certain components are going to take an absolute beating. Let's break down the common wear items you need to keep a close eye on during your first 12 months of hard ownership. First and foremost, we have to look at the front suspension, because the FJ utilizes an independent front suspension. IF's architecture, likely derived from the rugged IMV0 parts bin, your primary point of failure is going to be your ball joints and tie rod ends. From the factory, these components are engineered for the stock wheel and tire weight. But the reality is, The first thing you are going to do is bolt on a set of heavy E-load, rated 33-inch mud, terrain tires. You are instantly adding 15 to 20 pounds of unsprung rotating mass to each corner. When you hit a washboard dirt road at 40 miles per hour, or articulate the suspension over a rock ledge, the internal polymer cups inside those ball joints take immense shear force. Furthermore, your tie rod ends take the direct lateral impact of every rock your tire hits. Within 12 to 15 months of aggressive wheeling, you will likely start to feel a slight clunk in the steering wheel or notice uneven tire wear. A dead giveaway that the internal tolerances of those joints are completely shot. Next, we have to talk about the Achilles heel of any lifted IFS vehicle, the constant velocity CV axles and their rubber boots. If you install a 2-inch suspension lift to clear those bigger tires, you are drastically changing the operating angle of the front axles. This steeper angle causes the fins of the accordion style rubber CV boots to physically rub against each other as they spin. Over time, this friction wears the rubber thin. Add in the hazard of a sharp stick or a jagged rock on the trail, and that boot will tear. The second a CV boot tears, the centrifugal force of the spinning axle violently ejects all the internal molybdenum grease, while simultaneously sucking in water, sand, and abrasive mud. Once that silica grit gets inside the steel bearings of the CV joint, it will completely destroy itself within a few hundred miles. Inspecting those boots should be a mandatory post-trail ritual. We also cannot ignore your braking system. Specifically, how off-roading accelerates wear. We are not talking about highway commuting here, we are talking about mud. Mud is essentially liquid sandpaper. When you plunge your FJ into a deep, silty water crossing, that abrasive slurry gets trapped between the brake pads and the iron rotors. As you drive out and apply the brakes, the calipers clamp that grit directly into the friction material. It is entirely possible to chew through a brand new set of rear brake pads in a single brutal weekend of deep mudding. If you hear a grinding noise after a trail run, do not ignore it, or you will be replacing the expensive calipers and rotors right alongside the pads. Finally, the most common yet most neglected wear item is your engine air filter. If you spend a weekend driving in a convoy on a dry, dusty desert track, your FJ is constantly inhaling the massive cloud of ultrafine moon dust kicked up by the vehicle in front of you. That silica dust rapidly packs into the deep, corrugated paper pleats of the air filter. A choked air filter starves that 2.7L engine of oxygen, throwing off the air-fuel ratio, tanking your gas mileage, and potentially allowing microscopic dust past the mass airflow MAF sensor to score your cylinder walls. If you off-road regularly, do not wait for the 15,000-mile factory service interval. You need to be inspecting and replacing that filter every 6 months. We are finally at the end of the line for Phase 5, wrapping up our reality check with the ultimate safety net. The warranty. You are dropping serious money on this 2026 Land Cruiser FJ, and understanding exactly what Toyota will, and will not, pay for when things go sideways is absolutely critical. Let's start with the bumper. To bumper, or comprehensive, warranty from the factory, Toyota provides a 3-year or 36,000-mile guarantee. This covers virtually everything from the advanced 14-inch touchscreen display and the nanoe-X climate control to the sophisticated multi-terrain monitor cameras. If a microchip fries or an interior panel completely warps under normal use, Toyota replaces it on their dime. However, the term bumper to bumper is actually a bit of an industry illusion. It explicitly excludes routine wear items. If you burn up your brake pads in the mud, chew through a set of tires on the rocks, or snap a wiper blade on a branch that is coming straight out of your wallet. Toyota does soften this blow with standard Toyotalker, which covers your normal factory scheduled maintenance, like oil changes and tire rotations, for the first 2 years or 25,000 miles, but that does not cover trail abuse. Next, we have the heavy hitter, the powertrain warranty, which spans 5 years or 60,000 miles. This specifically protects the expensive, oil-lubricated mechanical heartbeat of the FJ. It covers the engine block, the cylinder head, the internal timing chain we discussed in Phase 2, the 6-speed transmission, the transfer case, and the differentials. If an internal manufacturing defect causes a rod bearing to fail on the highway, you get a new engine. If the hybrid battery option becomes available, Toyota traditionally covers that high-voltage battery component for an incredible 10 years or 150,000 miles. But here is the harsh reality of off-roading that dealership salespeople rarely explain. While you are legally protected by the Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act, meaning a manufacturer cannot void your entire warranty just because you installed an aftermarket part, they can deny a specific claim if they prove your modification caused the failure. If you install a massive 3-inch suspension lift and heavy 35-inch mud terrain tires, you are completely altering the factory driveline geometry and adding immense unsprung weight. If your front differential grenades itself while you are rock crawling, the dealership technician is going to look at those massive tires. Look at the extreme angle of your CV axles, and immediately flag the repair as customer abuse or modification. Your powertrain warranty claim will be denied for that specific component. Furthermore, if you submerge your FJ in a river crossing and the dealership finds mud and water inside the intake manifold or the sealed transmission fluid, the warranty is instantly voided for those parts. Warranties cover manufacturing defects, not poor driving decisions or the laws of physics. Understanding this boundary dictates exactly how aggressive you get with your aftermarket build during those first 36,000 miles. That officially concludes the master script for our deep dive into the 2026 Toyota Land Cruiser FJ. We have covered every bolt, wire, and chemical compound from the ground up. That is the 2026 Land Cruiser FJ from the frame up. Toyota is betting big on this baby legend. But I want to know what you think. Is the 2.7L engine a deal-breaker for you, or is the legendary reliability worth the power trade-off? Drop a comment below. I read every single one. If this deep dive helped you, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a breakdown. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next trail.